Everyone, welcome to the launch of the newest Global Tech Talent Trends report done by Landing.Jobs with the help and support of a community of tech professionals all over the world. The main goal of this session today is first to give you a small glimpse about some highlights from the report and then to have a panel discussion with two very insightful people. Jolie Grover, Senior Talent Acquisition Specialist at Signicat, a great company and a great speaker, and Fabio Vedovelli, Senior Software Engineer at Circle, representing more the talent side. The hope that I have for this session is that we all get out of it with more information that will allow us to make better decisions regarding when it comes to talent, decisions regarding their career, and companies knowing a bit better how to get more attractive and get the attention of tech talent all over the world. The main assumption behind, wait, sorry, Christina, not you, but the report, putting the report here online. Um, the main assumption here is basically that the world has changed a lot in terms of the globalization of tech work. That's the main reason that we have created this report, is that we felt that in some way there was no report that was covering things like working remotely from another country, relocation, the inclination that tech talent all over the world had regarding these kind of things, and also obviously tech stacks, languages, job roles, perks, a lot of things that every tech professional and company is concerned about and trying to get information to make better decisions. So without further ado, I'll try to be brief in this first presentation so that we can move on to a very interesting conversation with Jolie and Fabio, okay? And I'll be starting basically by the introduction. The topic that we are addressing more in this report, as I've mentioned, is the globalization of tech work. So trying to have a global report for a global market, especially after the pandemic. A lot of trends that were already more or less incipient before that took form, and nowadays what before was the exception, like remote work, nowadays it's the rule, and with a reach that was probably not imaginable before the pandemic. This shift, this brought a lot of challenges, and we at Landing.Jobs, we basically are a company that works like enablers of this globalization of tech work, connecting talent from all over the world with companies in Europe. We are already in the market for a lot of time. We have changed a lot of lives, served a lot of great companies, and with us, companies always get their talent and candidates always get an answer. It's kind of publicity, but one of the reasons we have made this report, as we will see, is also obviously to position Landing.Jobs in all this. So what has happened after the pandemic? There was obviously a growth of remote work, not only inside each country, but also across borders. And phenomena like digital nomads or even relocation gain a better significance, a higher significance, and things have changed. Companies basically opened their perspective to a much geographically broader scope than just their local talent. And this is why, because when it comes, for example, for European companies, there's a huge shortage of tech talent available, which is dampening companies' ability to be competitive in the market. So they are forced in some way to look at talent from everywhere else. So it's not just local talent, it's the world as a talent pool to get the people they need for the IT capacity that they also need. Another thing that has happened is that paying salaries and making contracts across borders before was very, very painful for both for companies and for talent. And that is fortunately no longer a problem. Companies like Landing.Jobs, for example, or remote.com or Deal, they have taken care of this using an employee of record status, or basically a company is able to pay the tech talent wherever they are in the world mostly. So this barrier that existed, a fiscal, a legal barrier, is no longer an impediment for this to happen. And obviously, tech talent worldwide is motivated to look for opportunities where they are better. So this removal of the barriers that existed through the globalization of tech work basically opened the doors to a lot of tech talent from all over the world to search for the better opportunities in the work mode that is available. This being not just working locally, but also working remotely to another country or even relocating. And obviously, people are always looking to improve their conditions, not just as professionals, but also as persons and eventually also to their families. And pretty much this is the main goal when it comes to talent, and at least we at Landing.Jobs, we are very talent focused, on helping tech professionals make the most out of their careers. Well, so what's happening here is that this report, as I've already mentioned, is basically trying to fill a lack of quality information with the global perspective regarding the tech markets. And also because we are not just doing this, we and the tech community that has helped get the data and create this report, it's not just to give information to one of the sides, it's basically if both sides have the same information, we're reducing the asymmetry of information that most of the times creates a lot of doubts and concerns, both in tech talent and also in companies. And what we want is for the game to be more fair, for everyone to be leveled in terms of information regarding salaries, regarding conditions, regarding the motivations, regarding perks, so that everyone gets the best deal possible, the market works as best as possible. And obviously, last but not the least, because for us, Landing.Jobs, besides wanting to help the community, we are a business, and we also want to get a reputation in this report, being what it is. And I am CMO of Landing.Jobs, so I have a very vested interest in this. Is trying to position us in the global market, both in terms of talent and in terms of cap. So it's not an innocent report from our side, but we hope that it's much more helpful for you tech talent and companies out there than for ourselves. But this is all very good, but what you want is the numbers, right? So this report is freely available for you. You'll have the link to download the report here during this event, so that you can scrap through all the 50 and some more pages of it. It's very dense in terms of information. It's very interesting, in my opinion. And we start usually by the topic of more relevance. What are the salaries, and in this case, the average salaries by continent of residence? And what we see here, obviously, is nothing new. North America leading the pack, Europe following, and Africa, Asia, and South America a bit more distant, but in some cases, and according to our data, increasing in terms of speed and diminishing this gap that exists between continents. This difference in salaries obviously explains a lot of the motivations of people, for example, in Africa, Asia, and South America, to try to search for opportunities in Europe and North America. It's completely natural that it occurs like that. Going to employment and status, we see here in terms of the type of status of employment is basically if you are a full-time employee with a work contract or if you work as a contractor. And what we see is that Europe and South America have the lowest number of both part-time and contractors, so mostly full-time employees. And this can be a sign of stagnation or some lack of market stability. But again, hypothesis here. But when we get, for example, to Africa, well, the market, it seems that in terms of maturity, it's strange for European and North American standards, for example, because there's a lot of contractors and a lot of part-time employees, okay? I'll leave the interpretation of this for people that know better the African market than I do. But interesting also is that in North America, compared, for example, with Europe, both mature markets in terms of tech, the percentage of contractors and part-time workers is much higher. And this is very interesting because it starts to denote a significant difference in the culture of work in both these two continents, okay? Going ahead, when you go for salary by employment status, what we see is in all the continents without exception that contractors earn more in terms of gross annual salary than full-time employees. Obviously, being a contractor has more risk, but one of the big reasons for someone to become a contractor, besides others, obviously, it's the pay. You have more risk, but you look for a higher reward. And we don't have data for North America here because the number of data points that we had didn't think it was enough to make it confident to present the results there. But when it comes, for example, for Europe, the gap is really, really big. And the question that some tech developers do a lot of times is, should I be a contractor? Well, this is the reason why the question exists, and it's kind of an overview or an insight of what's the difference, at least in terms of salary. Another interesting thing that we also go, leaving the employing status and going for company time. I'm going a bit fast, but I want to reserve time for the rest of the conversation. It's which company types should you work for, right? And we have this index, which is a multiplication factor because as salaries between continents differ a lot. We prefer, to put the least paying company type as factor one, and then the others being multipliers of this factor, just to have a notion of the differences in terms of salary between these company types. And what you see here is that scale it, the unicorns pretty much based on venture capital, very recent, very modern web-like businesses are the ones that are paying better. Now, this is not completely surprising because there's a lot of competition for top talent in these companies, and they obviously need to be willing to pay more. When we go to the other side of the spectrum, local outsourcing, so companies that basically hire people to sell their services for someone else at a margin, they are the least paying ones, because usually this is not only local, but they need to go for talent that is available to receive a lower salary and then sell that as a margin business. Then we also have corporate, and here corporate is not tech service providers, so it's not, for example, tech consulting firms. It's final clients like energy, like travel, companies that have their own products in some sense. They are the second best payers, and in third comes startups. So before scale-up startup, and startups are very competitive nowadays, something that didn't occur at least in Europe 10 years ago, for example. Nowadays, going to work for a startup in the beginning or in the middle or even in the end of a career, it's something that's a completely viable option. Going ahead, in terms of job role, and what's a job role? A job role basically is the kind of job that you develop in the functional terms. And we have two types of job roles. We have management, tech management only roles, and we have tech development roles, the separation that we did. So in terms of tech management roles, without surprise, this is the number of people working each of these roles, for you to have a notion of how the market demands this kind of roles. Well, in terms of tech management, the most prevalent role is technical team leader. It's kind of the combination, of a senior programmer with someone that has some leading skills and that has some leading attributions in terms of team. Then we have the project managers, the product owners and managers, and at last, the CTO. I see a glitch here. This technical team leader shouldn't be here. It's clear this is an ebook. I can correct this. So it's the launch, right? When it comes to tech development roles, well, full stack, backend, and front end, they basically make up for around 50% of all the development roles. These are not the more common roles. Then we start to drill down and to go for data scientist, UX UI, solutions architect, until the least representative class, which is sysadmin engineer. So this is interesting because, as we will see, the salaries in some of these cases, when you have job roles that are less representative, but they are niche, sometimes they are very well paid. And we'll look at such an example. One interesting thing is that this proportion of development and management, it's growing by time. Nowadays, there's more roles, management roles, than that they existed. And in my opinion, I'm also a computer science engineer from formation. This means that companies are really taking more seriously the management part of development. So it's not just a band of developers in a room doing things, not communicating with anyone, but the connection of these teams with the company and all the management that the process also needs. Companies are putting more money into making sure that these processes, these projects, the products, etc., that they were better managed than just leaving it to the chance of developers. It shows maturity in terms of an increasing level of maturity in the market regarding this. Going by for salary for professional role in terms of big groups, what we see, and also not surprisingly, is that usually, always, management roles earn in average more than development roles. But the gap is not so high as probably it was in the past, because nowadays you don't need necessarily to go for a management role to have a good salary. If you are a specialist, or if you go into being an architect or a solution architect or something like that with huge responsibility in a company, in a tech team, you can also get very good salary. But nevertheless, the distinction between tech management roles and development roles in terms of salary still exists. And I think it's very difficult that it will disappear one day, something to take into account. When you go for salary by tech roles by themselves, and this again is a multiplication factor, with the least well-paid role being maintenance and support, and the top, also without surprises, it's CTO. But the cool thing is, for example, you go to some to some roles like solutions architect or DevOps engineer, which are engineering development roles, not tech management roles, and they are very well paid. And these classes, in terms of job roles, they have a low representativity in the overall frequency chart of the number of people in each role, but they are very much sought for from companies because this, and afterwards coming computer network security, all roles that are very hot nowadays. So when we look at the trends of the market as a whole, it's pretty interesting for someone that wants to go into DevOps or computer network security or advancing to be a solutions architect. If you want to improve your salary, these are nowadays the paths that you should take in terms of specializing in a given job role. One curious thing here is that front-end developers, a very important thing, especially taking into account the attention that companies give to their front ends and interface and etc., is usually not very well paid. I have an hypothesis here is that usually people that go for front end are younger professionals, people with less experience, and the low average pay that they have regarding, for example, categories like backend developer or even full stack. Okay, again, it's an hypothesis. I bet you all have your own empirical data to compare with this and to make your own conclusions. Then I would like to hear about this. Okay. Another interesting data, it's the salary variation. Another typo, job. What we see here is that not only, for example, DevOps, it's one of the most well-paid categories right now, but they are also the ones that are having a higher variation in terms of salary in the last 12 months. So it's really something not only well-paid right now, but on the rise in terms of trend, okay? But then you basically, if you want to understand which are the job roles that have a higher growth trend, well, you have to look at this chart. And for example, maintenance and support, besides having the lower average salary, are also the ones that have had less variation in terms of salary change. Most of them, like you can see by the blue bar, which is hasn't changed, are in maintenance and support. Okay, now going for tech stacks, what are the most used languages out there in the world? And what we have is nothing new here. Basically, JavaScript is king. You know, it's the most used language. Just one thing: this is not one language per respondent of the survey that created the data for this report. Each respondent basically answered what were the technologies that they were using in their work. Okay, so each person could have answered to more than one of these, all of them, in theory. So this kind of the frequency distribution of the usage of these languages. Then we have SQL and HTML, which basically are structural languages. I will not take that into account. But what we see is that, for example, Python gets to the first level of the generic languages, you know, and again, an hypothesis that this has a lot to do with all the data science and data engineering work that is basically being done by a lot of companies based on this language. But then you have Java, a very old language. You know, I studied Java around 25 years ago, and it's still going on. You know, some say that probably this is due to mostly corporate projects. You know, in big companies. I don't know if it's so much like that. Another language that's also on the rise is TypeScript. It has been gaining positions along the years. C# is also in a good position, but then you go for the languages that are worst in terms of representativity. And you have VBA, Visual Basic 6, for example. Some people use VB6. And you have a set of very low frequency languages, niche languages, but that, as we will see, have in some cases that inverse proportion between the percentage of people using it and how much people that use it earn in terms of salary. And that we can see. For example, you see that languages like Perl, Elixir, Rust, Ruby, they are the least used languages, but they pay in average really well. Okay, so it's very interesting to witness this niche effect of some languages and the salaries that they get comparing to other, for example, C#. It is almost 1.2 regarding the least well paid. But when you go to Perl or to Ruby or Elixir, it's almost a factor of 2. It's a lot. It's more than 100%, you know, or almost 100%. So You have all this data in the report that you can analyze, and basically when you ask yourself, okay, what should I learn next? You should look at this combination of job role, tech stack, salaries, and etc., and make your own decisions. And also, obviously, taking into account the ones you like more. Well, when we go for a continent distribution by the top more generic languages, namely Java, Python, TypeScript, JavaScript, and C#, what we see basically is that they are more or well aligned between themselves in most of the case. So no huge variations here. If your main language is one of these, you probably are within some standard deviation of these scales, but there's not a clear difference that, for example, Python people earn a lot more than C# people. That is not true according to the data that we have. Now going from job roles, tech stacks to remote work, and this is very interesting. First, we're going for remote work in the most common sense of the word. So you're just working from whatever, but remotely. And what we see here is that the continent where people work mostly remote, it's Europe, North America, and South America. So only a small percentage still has full office jobs. When we come to Africa and Asia, it's interesting to understand how much people still need to go to an office. This probably has to do with cultural and market aspects. I'm not an expert in this, so obviously the data for your interpretation. But also it's very interesting, for example, that in South America, it has the highest percentage of full remote workers. So something is happening there. Either people are really, in terms of work culture, working mostly from their homes. I don't know if the pandemic still is in place enough in terms of social phenomenon to take this to being, well, something that's true. I really don't know. I have the doubt in my mind, but the data is this. In terms of employment status, what we see is that contractors tend to work more full remote than people who are full-time employees. Again, I think that nothing new here. It's just the observation of what I think would be everyone's answer regarding this question. But when we go for salary, taking into account the remote work situation, what we see is that basically, and as I think should also be expected, full office jobs pay an average worse than hybrid or full remote jobs. And this is, I would say, the biggest insight to take out of this chart, and it's very interesting that the difference can be very significant. For example, you look for North America and there's a huge difference. One interesting thing here, and I have no explanation for this, that in North America, people who have a hybrid job, so working between wherever and office, with a distribution update for each part, they are the most well paid. I don't know if this is a typical anomaly or if it's the reality of the market. Again, I'm not an expert in the North American market. I'm just giving the data, and I hope that you can help us to make more light, or to bring more light into the interpretation of this data. But the main thing is that if you want to have a good salary, don't go for a full office job. If you want to have a better salary, be more inclined to work in some kind of remote work. And now, not just remote work, but one thing that has happened a lot, mostly since the pandemic, which is the phenomenon of working remotely across borders, meeting supply and demand without the need, to be geographically close, to be working for a company, or for a company to hire people that are necessarily geographically close. What we can see here is that the salary, the percentage of tech professionals working for a company across borders, it's higher in South America than North America, Europe, and then it's lower in Asia and Africa. So besides the people that are working remotely, either for their own country or for countries outside, which are the previous chapter, indeed, we can see that what are the percentage of people that are working for another country remotely from their own country, okay? And this is something that's very interesting, and my prediction is that's going to increase a long time. And then you also see what are the employers' companies' continents. So people in Africa, they work mostly for Africa remotely, and then to Europe and to North America. So this chart allows us to see where people that work remotely for other companies, for companies in other countries, where do they work for? And what we see is that, for example, people in Europe and North America, no surprise here, they work mostly when they work for companies in other countries, it's in the same continent. So it's not in a different continent. In Africa, Asia, and South America, they work mostly for companies in countries in other continents. It's CCC. And we see, for example, that South America, probably due to the alignment of time zone, works mostly for North America, remotely. When we have people in Africa and Asia, they split it mostly between Europe and North America. But it's very interesting to see that, for example, when we look at working remotely and we think about time zone compatibility, a lot of people still work from Africa and Asia, which are very, very different in terms of time zones from North America to North America. It's interesting. It's the same thing that, for example, people in South America working remotely to companies in Europe. So this means that companies, at least a huge number of them, is beginning to work better in a more asynchronous way, compatibilizing time zones across teams that might be spread, distributed along the world. And it's very interesting to watch this trend, because these companies from these continents, mostly Europe and North America, they are really opening up to go and hire talent to work remotely from continents like Asia, Africa, and South America. Well, going on, they are telling me I need to speed up. When we go about salary, salary for people working locally or working for companies in other continents remotely, what we see is almost all people in terms of the continent of residence, Africa, Asia, Europe, and South America, people working for companies across borders, they earn more than people working for local companies, with the exception of North America. And I think that this is easy to see why, North America being the continent that pays better, people that are working in North America for local companies tend to earn better and not look for jobs outside. So usually when I would say, an hypothesis, when North America works for a company somewhere else, is that because they just don't want to work for North American companies. They want to work for other companies for experiences or whatever. So this is the only exception. And I think that it makes sense here because of the nature of the salary leader, or at least in North America. But the main thing is that a lot of tech talent is looking now and considering tech talent in companies, the tech talent working remotely for companies across borders, and companies are getting more and more open to it. So this is a huge global trend. When we come to reasons for talent to work remotely for a company across borders, well, the interesting thing is that it's not about salary. Salary only comes in second. Only, obviously, it's a good position, but it's mostly identified as better work-life balance. And this is very interesting because when we think about better work-life balance, you think about working remotely for a continent in another country. It touches deep, I think, in the way that tech talent that is in this work mode can organize their lives. And it's very interesting to understand that being salary in second, the work from wherever I want, this might be a bit small, but you'll get this all in the report. It just comes in third. So better work-life balance is what you should take out of it. You have regional differences. You can look at this table in more detail in the report. I'll not go over it. And the preferred places to work remotely for, so people inclined to work remotely for other countries, most of them would like to work for European company. Second, North America, and then South America, etc., etc., etc. When it comes to Europe and decomposing this, basically you have this kind of mix of regions with UK, Germany, Portugal, and Spain, and France and Luxembourg and the Nordics. No big difference in terms of the preferences of the specific places in Europe within these, obviously, these country groups where people would rather work for. Okay, so, but here the thing is that Europe is the most sought for continent to work remotely from where people are, being it in South America, Asia, or Africa. So when working remotely across borders, this has become a way for global talent to advance their careers while improving salaries and work-life balance, what I just said. I'm just reading this. And for companies, as I've already said also, it's a way to tap into the global tech talent market to basically, overcome the lack of the shortage of tech talent that exists locally. And it's both a way to optimize costs, get the talent that they need, of course, but also optimize costs and improve competitiveness, for the dyslexia. But the main thing, and this is very important for companies listening to this, is that they really need to learn how to work as distributed teams. You know, you might have different tech teams spread all around the world. You might have one person in one country, might have a lot of people hanging around the headquarters, but the methodologies for work in this kind of way, it's different than the previous modes of work, and there's a learning to be done here, but more than a learning, there needs to be a will and the sense of the opportunity that this is to really stop the lack of tech talent locally to be a barrier to competitiveness. Well, going on, working remotely for other countries and now relocating. It's the other side of the coin. So what we see is that in this chart, the people that basically reside nowadays in these continents, where have they come from? So tech workers in Africa, they're mostly from Africa, local talent. In Asia, a lot of local talent, but also a lot of talent that came from Africa. This is very interesting, and I don't know exactly the explanation here, but this is the data. In Europe, mostly local talent from Europe, a bit from South America, and very small percentages for Africa and Asia. North America, compared to Europe, it's a bit different, Around 35% of tech professionals in North America are not originary from North America. This is a huge difference between Europe and North America. And basically, to me, the reading is that Europe has still not waken up as much as North America to this opportunity, to this possibility of really having people from other continents to come work in Europe for them. Obviously, we know that North America is a country of immigration, etc., but Europe is also a country of immigration. And there's this lack, in my understanding, it's huge. It's too big a lack for the good of Europe. Europe should open a bit the European companies the rights for this. In South America, again, the people working in South America are mostly local talent. So we have clear clusters here, North America, Europe, and then Africa, Asia with that difference in South America. But what I take most out of this is that the gap that Europe still is for relocating people from other continents to come supply the IT workforce, the local IT workforce compared to North America. Regarding the openness of people in Africa, Asia, Europe, or North America to relocate, what we see is basically two big clusters, I would say, Africa, Asia, and South America, that are very willing to relocate to another continent. Okay, and then we see Europe and North America not so much, but again, what we see in Europe is that most people want to stay in their own country, around 40%. It's a huge percentage comparing to all the other regions. Some want to relocate, but inside Europe to another continent, for example, Portugal to Germany, let's say, or Germany to Portugal, why not? And then only the smallest percentage is open to relocate to other continents. Okay, sorry. Again, this means that in Europe, tech talent, it's, I don't know, comfortable, stagnated, but they are not very willing to change things in their own lives. Okay, again, this is a huge problem for companies, probably because the dynamic of the workflows, the movements of people relocating between countries, it's smaller, but it's something that can be changed mostly by opening up for talent from other continents. My voice is fading, sorry. When it comes to relocation reasons, it's a bit different than the work remotely to other continent. People seek more for quality of life. Quality of life is a bit subjective and can be understood probably in different ways by different people, but well, data is what it is. And only in third comes salary. And this is very interesting because, for example, looking for better companies, better jobs, professional challenges comes in second. Understanding these motivations from people from different origins, from different continents, it's very important. For example, when you are a company trying to define a tech talent policy in terms of strategy, in terms of using the willingness that people have to relocate, and it's huge, especially from continents like Africa, South America, and Asia, to meet their needs in terms of IT talent. Once again, more detail in this table. I'm not go over it in the report. Take the data for what it is. If you have insights based on this, please share it afterwards. In terms of preferred places to relocate to, again, Europe in first and North America in second, so no change in positions, but the difference between Europe and North America increased here. So people, when considering relocation, not working remotely from where they are to another continent, relocation, changing their lives and probably also their families' lives to somewhere different, to different continent, Europe is the continent that is preferred by the majority of people. And again, here what we have is no big differences in terms of large differences, sorry about the redundancy, on the place where people want to go. And it changes across people from Asia or Africa or North America or South America. These countries change. That detail is also in the report. You can check it out for your own reality. So about relocation, people basically went to relocate to advance their careers, but also to guarantee a better quality of life and safety for them and their families. And regarding companies, they have a huge opportunity here, in considering people that are willing, to take the challenge of changing their whole lives to come and work in Europe or in North America. Obviously, companies need to learn how to manage cultural differences, but more than all, companies, and I know better the European context, they need to be less risk averse in this kind of movements, because the opportunity is passing, and for example, North America is basically grasping it much more than Europe are, and having an advantage on that. Well, almost finishing career drivers. What we have, summing it all, across all the respondents, that salary and benefits as a whole still maxes the career drivers choices, followed by work-life balance. Okay, so these are the two most chosen career drivers of everyone else. To me, a bit surprisingly, recognition and status is on the lower end. It means that probably tech professionals are really getting the notion that, that they are worthwhile and they do not need the recognition of anyone to consider themselves as good professionals in the field that they work. Motivation to change jobs, also interesting, the context of each continent. So again, we have two clear clusters here, Africa, Asia, and South America, of people that are very willing to change jobs in the next 3 months. And then you have Europe and North America, more Europe than North America, which are a bit more reticent to change jobs. So again, probably they are more comfortable in the jobs that they are at. They have less motivations to change, so they are less keen to look for professional challenges. But again, the opportunity for this globalization of tech work, especially in these workflows, working remotely or relocating between different places, it's also recognized in this data. And this is it for the first part. So, when the main question is, you, tech talent, you company, are you ready to be part of the globalization of tech work, to reap the rewards that this new world has brought us? And it's still a world in change, but this report already gives us a glimpse of the trends that we are living right now. I really hope to see the changes for next year's report, but now we have a year to do this. Just one note, besides this main report, we'll be also creating some more specific reports for countries, continents, also some topics like global workflows or salaries that we'll be releasing during the next month. So besides this event, be on the lookout for new informations, new reports that might be interesting for you. And we will probably also be releasing the anonymized base data for this, so that the community can complement the insights that we try to bring in this report with their own insights, helping the global community be more informed and have better information to make better decisions regarding their careers. So let's move on to the second part. Thank you for listening to me.